Okay, let's continue with the string formatting. So to format a string, well, our goal is we want to combine or put several components together into a string. So for example, I want to print a string like I can add integers like 5 to strings. Well, this 5 can be 5, it can be 6, it can be 15. But anyhow, this file will be plugged in into a string. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, one of the tricks we have learned is that we can do the casting, right? So we can force a number to be a string. So for example, if I want to use this trick and then I want to do a string 5. So even this 5 is originally a string, I want to put that into a string, and then I'm going to do string concatenations. So one string here, and then the second string, and then the third string. So I'm just concatenating three strings together. So well, probably this can be considered as a brute force way of formatting a string. So my question is, why it is bad? It's bad because we are just plug in one value 5 into this string. However, we have to use one cast and then two concatenations already. But if we want to do something complicated, we want to plug in multiple parts into a string, and then it will be hard. So what do I mean? Well, say my age is, and then say my age is 21 years and 3 months, and it's not really me, okay? I hope I'm so young, but I'm not, okay? Well, if I want to plug in 21 as one component, years as a second component, and then 3 and months, so a total of 4 components, and then we really have to use a lot of concatenations and then a lot of the casting. So this solution works okay if you only have a small part you want to plug in into a string. However, if you do have multiple components you have to plug in into a string, and then you have to do a formatting with a different way. And the first way I want to introduce to you is string formatting with percent signs. And for the percent signs, or another way to format a string, the thinking is the same. The thinking is we define a string with placeholders, and after we finish defining a string with however many of the placeholders we want to plug in, and then we fill in the values to the positions held by the placeholders. So for this one, well, the rule is, well, %d is a placeholder for integer, %f is a placeholder for float, and %s is a placeholder for a string. So 3 types of the placeholders. Now, if I want to define a string with placeholders, it can be like this. So quotes, we are still using quotes, and then my age is, and then %d, a %s, so placeholder for integer, placeholder for string, placeholder for another integer, placeholder for another string. Okay, so this is how I want to format my age is 21 years and 3 months. A integer, a string, another integer, another string. Okay, and then after defining this string with placeholders, I do a % sign and then parentheses. And inside of the parentheses, I just tell what should be the 4 values I want to backfill into the 4 placeholders. So then, since I have 4 placeholders, I also want to plug in 4 values. And what are they? They are 21 as an integer, years as a string, 3 as an integer, months as a string. So 4 placeholders and 4 values, and later they are gonna backfill in to the right places. Okay, so this is the first way of doing the formatting with the % sign. And we can also do some of the additional formatting. For example, here I'm doing a .2f. What does that mean? That is % sign f. That is a placeholder for a float number. But if I do a .2, this means I'm only keeping 2 digits after the decimal, and I can do that. So for this string, that is your monthly payment is a %sign F with 2 digits after decimal. And then you will be paying for the next %D, that is a integer, right? So here is a placeholder for a float number with only 2 digits after decimal, and then later we also have a placeholder of a integer. So a total of 2 values, and then after the %sign here, I need to backfill in 2 values. They are the monthly payment and the number of the month. Okay, so then I will be able to print a string like this. So this is the first value we filled in, and that is the float value and only 2 digits after decimal, and the second is a 60. So that's the first way of doing the formatting. And the second way is kind of similar. That is, we want to, the thinking is the same. We define a string with placeholders, and then we want to do a dot format. Using the dot format, again, our process is we want to backfill in the values. We use the placeholders. So if you want to do the same thing, my age is, and then placeholder 0, placeholder 1, placeholder 2, placeholder 3. Now we are using the curly braces to number the placeholders. And after that, we do a dot format. Dot format, we have 4 values we want to backfill in, right? So the placeholder 0 will be 21, the placeholder 1 will be years, the placeholder 2 will be 3, and placeholder 3 will be months. So we get the same thing. But for this version with the dot format, one of the trick, and probably that is a really confusing trick, is we don't have to number the placeholders from 0 to 3. You can actually number the placeholders any way you want to. So for example, if you have the first placeholder as the number 3, and then number 3 should be 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So 21 will backfill into the 3, and then 0. 0 is placeholder 0, that is the years. So 21 years. So it can also work this way. However, unless you are trying to showing off your skill on learning or understanding this kind of trick, usually in the real industry you don't do this, and this will make your code really hard to read. Okay, and well, another thing about doing the dot format is you can reuse the same value if you are backfilled in multiple slots with the same value. Okay, so here's another example. I have placeholder 0, placeholder 1, placeholder 2, and placeholder 2. Okay, 2 placeholder 2. Why? Because Mr. Bradley and Mr. Tompkins, they have the same title, that is Mr. Okay, so even though there are 4 placeholders, but I'm only backfilling in 3 values. And for 2 placeholders, they are using the same value, Mr. So this is another way. It's another way that we can make our code a little bit shorter. Okay. So the next thing, type. Well, we don't know that, but if we really want to check a type of a object, what you can do is you can do the type parentheses and then whatever object you want to check, and then print it out. So for example, I define a string, hello string, and then the initial value is hello. And then if we want to check what data type this hello string is, what I can do is print the type of the hello string, and then I will get a string. So this is to check with Python and let Python tell me what data type is that. And then after knowing the type, and we also have learned the typecasting. That is, if we want to force a value or a object to be another type of the object, and then we can use casting. So for example, we can force a value to be an integer, a float, a long integer, a string, a hexadecimal, or a octal. So those are all the values we can try to force something into. Do they always work, by the way? The answer is probably no. But usually the common way is if we have a string, we want to force that to be an integer, for example. Say if you have a 34, and then if you want to force that to be an integer 34, and then 34 is a string, force it to be an integer, so a is 34 as an integer. And similar thing for the float, and then I can force this value to be a float number. Okay, well, but here I want to try something with you. Say I have int cast int equals int 34, and then if I want to print this cast int, can I do that? And if I run this, and the answer should be okay, 34, right? But oh, I forgot to add the code. So I'm forcing an integer into an integer, and of course it works. But now let me add the code here. Okay, it still works. So that is originally it is string, and now I'm forcing that to be an integer, and that's good. Okay, and let me do a 34.0, and then let's try to make it a float number. So now it is a cast float, and then cast float. Okay, so 34.0, I'm casting a string 34.0 to an integer number, to a float number. Does that work this way? Okay, good, it works this way. Well, another thing I want to try is cast int equals int string 34.0. Okay, and then I want to do a cast int. Does this word work? So this is a string, but it looks like it is a float number, not an integer, right? So if I want to force that to be an integer, can Python do that for me? So I got a 34.0. Let me get rid of this code. It's a little bit unreadable, and run this again. Okay, you see what? This is a 34.0. This looks like a float. However, I want to cast it into an integer, and then I got an arrow. This arrow is invalid literal for int. So this string, I want to force it to be an integer, but Python will say, sorry, I can't do that for you, right? So let me do something even harder. How about this? So 34 UU, that is not really an integer, right? So if I want to grab this string and then cast it into an integer, what am I gonna have? So run this again. Okay, that's a value error again because I cannot cast the 34 UU into an integer. So let's come back. So just now I asked this question, do they always work? The answer is no. Okay, so to make it work, you have to say, for example, if you want to cast a string into an integer or a float, they should look like an integer or a float. Okay, otherwise, and you may have some type value error when you do the casting. Okay, and one of the most common way when we do the casting is when we take the user's input from the keyboard, and then they are always strings. And for some of the cases, we want to treat those values to be different data types. For example, in this one, I'm asking you what in which year was Amazon founded, and then you can tell me the answer, and then I want to treat that is a year number, right? So for example, 1999, I don't know, I'm just guessing 1999, okay? 1999 is input as a string. But if I want to really treat it as an integer, what do? We can do a int and then year input, right? The year input is what user types from the keyboard. But I want to treat that as an integer, so I want to convert or cast that into an integer. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and next video we are going to talk about the arrows in Python.